Welcome to Money Talk with Aaron Ricketts, presented by Ricketts Associates, 3245 North Adrian Highway, Suite F. The opinions voiced on Money Talk are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Welcome to another edition of Money Talk here on Saturday afternoon. Aaron back in the studios with us. Hey, Aaron.
Hi, John.
Well, all you got to do is wait long enough, and something wild is always bound to happen. Doesn't necessarily mean it should happen.
Yes.
But it's happening, so we got to address it, right?
Right. So we'll talk about the markets this week and the sell-off, and hopefully the rational change that always comes from this. I use the term capitulation. I've used that in 2018 and 2015, and of course 2008. We had large market declines in short periods of time. At some point the sale or the price of stock and bonds and whatever investments that you have, it becomes a bargain at some point. And I'm not saying that we're even close to being at that level. Our sell-off on Monday and Tuesday was somewhere around 5% total, 3.5% and 1.5%, 2%, somewhere around 5% total for the S&P 500, the 500 large companies. So, we're not even close to having some issue, and maybe things have calmed a bit, But I wanted to talk about a few reasons why this virus outbreak and our concerns, or the news media's concerns, the big 24-hour news cycle seems to be making sure that we know everything we need to know about that almost ad nauseum, right? So it is possible that a lot of these fears are overblown. So let's talk a little bit about history and some of the other disease breakouts that we've had. And I'll probably touch on what some of the big medical companies have said, or the government, of course, the CDC, and then maybe John Hopkins and others that look at the disease control as probably a lot more closer than your local hospitals do, right? Because they have the research groups to take care of that stuff. So even if this coronavirus turns out to be as contagious and deadly as real bad contagious diseases like Ebola, do you remember the Ebola epidemic? It will most likely be successfully curbed, right? We'll control it. The Ebola outbreak a few years ago was effectively kept in check, and so were the SARS. Remember the severe acute respiratory syndrome, the SARS? That outbreak was in 2003 and 4. And then we had the Middle East respiratory syndrome. That was MERS. That outbreak was about 10 years ago. And lots of concerns. We had the same issues that are going on today about control and what's going to happen. And as time goes by, we even forget about Ebola. We forgot about SARS, and we forgot about MERS over this time because it became controlled, and it affected, very little of the population of the world, very, very little. All three of those outbreaks were contained before they could have any significant impact on the global economy or financial markets around the world. And we expect the same outcome, from this current outbreak. It's just going to take time to, get through it, and where you might say, and I'm sure it was with these other diseases, things were controlled. We thought they were controlled, and then there were outbreaks elsewhere. I certainly do remember the Ebola outbreak and the big concerns that because it was so deadly, anybody who contracted it was in serious, grave health. And we don't see that with this, outbreak, and same with SARS and MERS. This outbreak is affecting, a lot of the older people. I guess my understanding is the average age of those that have been that died from disease that contracted are 75 or older. No young person has died from the disease, and I think the youngest is over 40 so far. But that can change in any day or any minute. But you can see that just like the flu, right, kills thousands of people in this country every year, and most of them are very old or very young. So those who have the immune system. Of course, I'm not a doctor, but I think this is common knowledge. So that's my first thing, is a little history check about the control or what is expected by the global health community to control this virus. The biggest concern is the ability to move goods, right? To move goods around the world. And there's been this, I think, confusion that, there's no ships leaving China. There's no ships coming in from China, moving goods and services. Food that we eat every day, is all, right here, is mostly in this country, and some comes from other countries, but most of it's right here. So we're mainly looking at those goods that are bought at our local stores or we buy online that, if a ship gets delayed for whatever reason, they're figuring that out, how to get the goods over to us. Another point is this lockdown that they have over in China, this area that where this disease has started, that particular province, it affects a very small part of China. The cities locked down that are near that one Wuhan district right there are somewhere, in the millions. But of course, China is 1.4 billion people. So there's no other areas that are locked down. They say that area produces very little of the overall GDP of China, somewhere less than 5%. So over time, it could be an effect, but, most likely they're going to get this under control. And it's just still a small part of that area that's being sequestered, if you will. The public typically overreacts to the health threats. And I think, again, it's that 24-hour news cycle that's, we listen to and we see. And of course, we have social media that puts a lot of information or misinformation out there. And, we're not doctors and most of us, and we're not infectious disease doctors. We don't live in that world. So just about anybody can, write something, and sometimes it can, no pun intended, go viral and be out there, and it's all just misinformation. And I've heard a few things. I focus on some of certain news programs that I don't want that 24-hour news cycle, because to me, it's just not good information when they repeat themselves every 5-10 minutes. I want good, solid reporting that maybe I can get a 15-minute or a half-hour discussion about certain issues. So we often, again, typically overreact to that stuff, and we live in this like echo chamber, right? So whatever's said, it just keeps coming back to us, and we've heard this stuff, often if you say something, even if it's not true, if you say it often enough, you start believing it, or people start believing it. So just be cautious of that. Another point to make is any economic impact will be short-lived. So if there is some type of consumer spending decline, because that's very often what the issue is, not just in our country, but across the world, people have to spend the money that they receive from their paychecks, and that's called consumer spending. If that, just the thought of this, of a problem out there, especially with this, virus, if not just the economic impact, but, could this virus affect me, right? Could it, could I actually get the virus? What's going to happen if I do get the virus and spread it to my family? People think about this stuff, but that could, just the thoughts could reduce the amount of spending that people do, right? I mean, we're in a small community here, and if the virus was found to be here, you could see a small economic decline right in here, because a lot of people might just not go out in those social places. to do business because they're afraid or they're concerned. You could see where that could happen in certain areas. Most people, I think, are just going to continue to go about their daily life and expect that this thing is going to be taken care of. So those are some points that I wanted to bring up about the virus. We're not sure what's going to happen, but I gave you some history about what has happened with other outbreaks, and it's all been controlled, and really it was just a minor blip in our economic cycle.
And so, like we always say, just stay the course.
Yes.
I mean, not only is this probably a time not to get out of the market, but it may be a time to invest more in the market.
Right. If anything, you don't want to become too cautious, right? Or too greedy, right?
Right.
You want to do whatever your plan was for your money, for your retirement accounts, for your non-retirement accounts, whatever your plan was before, you want to continue that. Now, some people, though, they are already taking too much risk, or they're not taking enough risk. So maybe now is not the time to make those adjustments. You might want to see this through and then rethink your plan, create a new plan, but make sure that you're comfortable with your investments and how they're being invested, either through yourself or through a financial advisor. And the worst time to make any changes to something is when it's because of some outside issue, something that is different or has changed. Not you, your plan or your life has changed, but something on the outside has changed. That is when it's probably the worst time to make a change with your investments. I tell people this all the time. They see me when they're 20, 30, 40 years old or 50, and they're still contributing, and they're like, man, I love seeing my 401k. It's the highest, account value I've ever seen. I just love it. I love it. I love it. And then the market declines, maybe like this, and then they get their account statement and we look at it and they say, what do we need to do? I really don't like this, that, I lost 2, 3, 4, 5% or several $1,000s in the market. Well, you didn't lose anything, right? Because you didn't sell it. Hate to say that old adage, but it is true. But the other thing is, when do you really want the market to be at a peak? Do you want it to be at a peak when you're 30, or do you want the market to be at a peak when you're 60 or 70 or 80? So think of it that way, that, when the market is in a decline, or maybe at some point we can call it at a discount, that's when you're going to buy. And you're going to buy in, and you're going to buy heavy, and you're going to buy what you want and when you want it at that time, because there's no better time, right, to buy something until it's on sale. That's when you want to buy it, right?
Right.
Something's at $10 a share and it goes to $8. You buy it at $8. You're like, oh man, I just bought it at $8, and then it goes down to $6. You're like, I guess I need to buy some more, right? Even though I bought some $8 and I lost a little bit on that. That's the whole idea. You just keep buying and buying and buying over the long term. The market's always going to get you a good solid return. It's the best risk. There are no guarantees to any of that, but it's the best risk that you can take for the amount, the probable return that you're going to get compared to almost any type of investment out there.
Well, and of course, if you're a person out there that you need a little consultation in this topsy-turvy time that we're having here in the moment, they can always get that, right? That's
right, because when things like this happen, like this week, I say this is when we really earn our pay, right? We really got to work harder to make sure that everybody's understanding this is what our plan is. This is why we're doing it this way. And we're always going to have these little blips and things that we have to deal with. But if anybody has any questions, call me 265-3540.
Yeah, make sure you give Aaron a call. He'll be able to calm your nerves based on all the experience that he has and what he has seen over many, many years. Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Thanks, John.
That's Money Talk with Aaron Ricketts, presented by Ricketts Associates, 3245 North Adrian Highway, Suite L. The opinions voiced on Money Talk are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Join us once again next week for Money Talk here on 103.9 WLEN.